While I had meant to do a video on this particular subject, and for whatever reason, there were more important things that came to the fore. But I think it's time that I did a video on this particular story. I don't know for how long the face of drugs has been the face of black people. Anytime you heard about drug addiction and street sellers, dealers, etc., the majority of the time a black face was put to it. And these black faces were all considered to be, quote unquote, criminals, degenerates, lowlifes, etc. But now, all of a sudden, the face of drugs is changing. Why is it changing? Because now, all of a sudden, and maybe not so all of a sudden, heroin and other opiates are being used by white people to greater numbers than in the past. They were always used, but now they're being used by greater numbers, and it's being called an epidemic. It wasn't an epidemic when the drug use was portrayed as being pretty much solely in minority communities, but now that it's reared its quote-unquote ugly head and mainstream America is getting hooked, now all of a sudden it's a medical condition. Now all of a sudden people need help, not jail. I'm going to play this story that MSNBC ran, and I just want to point out to you that a segment of the story is going to show some inmates, female inmates in jail. And I want you to notice the makeup of those inmates.
A lot about heroin on this show and the nation's heroin epidemic. It has become a campaign issue, and this weekend a lot of people woke up to find a shocking photo on their Facebook news feeds of two parents in Ohio who had overdosed in the front seat of their car with a small child in the back seat. Ohio, a state both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are fighting hard to win, of course, continues to lose the fight against heroin and prescription drugs. In 2014, the CDC says the state was second in drug overdoses nationwide. As part of his Up for Grabs series, Jacob Soboroff traveled to meet an Ohio man who sees this crisis firsthand every day, and he happens to be one of Donald Trump's biggest supporters. Jacob joins me now. Hi, Jacob.
Hey, Kate, you have reported so extensively on this crisis, and in the state of Ohio, we are now seeing over 20 people killed every single week at the hands of heroin. You remember in the primary election, this was practically unavoidable for the presidential candidates in the Northeast. It came up in almost every town hall in the New Hampshire area. Come with me, I want to show you something about Ohio, though, because since we have been into the general election campaign, this issue has not become as pronounced. Candidates are not as vocal about it. But in Ohio, one of the most important swing states in the entire nation, you look at this county right here, Butler County, and you look at the sheriff in that county, Richard Jones. He's one of Donald Trump's biggest supporters, and every single day he sees this crisis firsthand. The door
doors closing, so you are now locked in.
So how big is this place? How many people are in here?
We can hold 1,000 prisoners.
Sheriff, how bad is the heroin and the opioid crisis here in Butler County?
It's the same as it is all over the country. It's just eating us alive, and no one has an idea or a cure of how to stop it. The drugs that are pouring into our community, most of the heroin and things, that the meth, is coming across the Mexican border.
Anybody comfortable telling me why they're here?
Heroin. I'm in here on a robbery and a possession of heroin.
Yourself?
And I'm in here on a counterfeit controlled substance.
Meth.
Meth. And yours?
I'm in here on a felony by possession of heroin.
Everybody drugs.
Yeah.
Is it a bad problem around here?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
I'm a heroin addict and I think about heroin 24/7.
One little trigger will lead you to something. Like me, I'm pregnant.
How many kids do you have right now?
I got 2 that my brother's got custody of, and I'm pregnant of 1.
I got 3 and I'm getting ready to lose all my rights to my kids. I have 2 stepkids and one of my own.
Who's going to help stop this problem and help you guys and help get rid of these drugs?
We need to get off the drug dealers off the street, even though they're going to keep coming. But something needs to happen.
Are you watching closely the presidential election?
Yeah.
Can either of those candidates, any of them, solve the problem?
I don't know.
Another issue that you're very well known for is your outspokenness on illegal immigration.
That's correct.
How does that affect your prison population and your law enforcement strategy?
Basically here, we have roughly 300 prisoners from other countries. And somebody says, well, it's no different than your criminals that you have in your jail that are American born. I said, that's correct, but I wish I could deport some of them, but no country would take them. Drugs are pouring in and our government will not fix it. Trump has pledged that he will fix it. Hillary has pledged that she's going to give everybody amnesty, and I have no idea where it's going to end.
Kate, the sheriff who you just met in the piece there said on Friday that he doesn't actually support the idea of immunity for people like the women in the piece turning in heroin in exchange for leniency or rehabilitation instead of prison sentences. These stats are far too familiar to the people in Ohio. They just want an answer at this point from the candidates.
Yeah, okay. Jacob Soboroff. Jacob, thanks so much for continuing to report on that. We'll be right back.
Now, I have no doubt that those 5 women that they had up there, they could have swapped them out, and there could have been 5 black women or even 5 Hispanic women. Maybe not the Hispanic, because in that particular county, the population is 86 plus, closer to 90% white. You have about 7% black, and you got about 3% Hispanic. All right. But the officer there claimed that he had 300, I guess, illegal alien prisoners, and his jail holds 1,000. So if he's full, he's got 30% illegal aliens and another 70% U.S. born. But now my question is this: if those drugs are pouring across the border, which they probably more than likely are, how are those drugs getting up to Illinois and Ohio and New Hampshire, etc.? Because it damn sure is not black people that are transporting those drugs up there, because they would be noticeable. And I mean highly noticeable. So it's got to be white people or people that look white that are moving those drugs in there. And anytime you have an 86 to 90% white population, those people are not buying their drugs from black people. They're buying them from their own people. Just like in New Hampshire, where that piece of shit governor was talking about Smoothie D and this guy, that guy, the other guy, claiming that his drug problem is because of black people. That's a bunch of bullshit. Okay? Now, am I going to say that maybe there are some black guys rolling up into New Hampshire from New York? Yeah, probably are. But the ones that are really moving it on the streets, those have to be primarily white guys. Because that governor and the police in that particular state, they have a very high rate of stopping and arresting minorities, particularly black people, that come through there. And that's documented. That piece of crap governor even said it himself. So the problem now has been exposed for what it really is. Drugs are a problem for everybody, but now all of a sudden, since everybody is including a lot of white people, now it's a medical situation, it's an epidemic. I'm not for drugs, never have been for any kind of heavy drugs. Marijuana, I put that in a different category. But when you start talking about heroin and cocaine, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, no, never been for that, never will be for that. But it's time that we address this particular issue and give it the attention that it deserves. And it's also time that we call this thing for what it is. It's a money-making venture for certain people, and we need to either get the money out of it, and again, I'm not for legalization, but we definitely need to do something about this. But the reason this is getting so much daylight, so much press coverage, is because of the overall number of white people that are getting hooked. The fact that drugs don't know any color, any race or religion. Drugs are drugs, and they're going to hit who they're going to hit. And now, because people are up in arms because it's hitting their quote-unquote majority white communities, now all of a sudden we're looking at trying to do something when we should have been looking at trying to do something back in the 60s, and it shouldn't have been such an issue as far as the criminalization and also the racialization of the drug issue. But we are where we are, and obviously we're gonna have to do something about it because people are dying, and people are dying in record numbers.